You read all of it.
I told you, I asked you a question.
Then I'll correct my
Just
statement.
kidding.
There's one thing I think.
Then I'll correct my statement. You haven't read all of
What
it.
he's saying
Maybe.
is correct in the sense of a particular country. For example, in Saudi Arabia, they are called the religious police. Yeah, the religious police. So
They are.
religious
Sorry,
police,
go on.
where if the government has this rule where women have to cover themselves up in public, and if you don't, then the religious police will come and either
They used to beat the women.
I'm
But
not
now
sure the
they
mechanisms.
changed.
I'm
Now
not
they
sure
changed.
what they used to do, but you had
Because they
the
follow
religious
Salaf.
police enforcing their law. Like in Iran, for example, how women should be dressed up used to be a law from the government. You can't just dress any way you like. When the revolution came and so on, so you can see all politicized and contextualized because of the laws of the country. If this country, for example, legislates tomorrow and says everyone has to wear a hijab, and if you don't, then you'll be penalized. This is what we'll expect. If you don't wear it, police will come or someone will come and penalize us.
And if
Because
he didn't pray also, and if
that's
he
my
didn't pray,
point.
not
Yeah,
only
yeah.
for the woman,
Sure.
you
You would
also
probably
gonna
get
get
beaten
beaten up.
up.
No,
if
no.
you
What
didn't
I'm saying
pray.
is,
In Taliban.
If you love the woman.
this is talking about certain laws that are being applied by government, which are under legislation. So a Muslim who doesn't pray, maybe the religious police in Saudi Arabia would come and beat them up too. Yeah, they're
Are you
probably
saying that's
implement like
okay?
that. So what your problem is not actually with Islam or the teaching of
Muslims
Islam.
have the idea-
Your problem would be an institution like a government who's forcing its law, which you think shouldn't be. That's the case, isn't it?
No, because a lot of their laws is derived from the Salaf and the Hadith, so there's always going to be problems with me and Islam.
So if you think about beating up women in public not wearing hijab during the time of the Prophet sallallahu
Why
alaihi
did the
wasallam,
Taliban do that?
excuse me, during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, did they do that?
Maybe, I don't know. But
So
why did the Taliban
when you say
do that?
maybe I don't know that, then actually you're coming from an angle where your research on a subject matter, which is insufficient in your own words,
Yeah,
and then you're making up certain opinions about Islam based on your insufficient research. You don't know, and you're making your value judgment. You cannot have a value judgment on something when you don't even know the subject matter.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know about Islam if women don't wear the hijab, like for her case. Maybe she wouldn't be beaten up. Maybe she would be, depending on the Islamic teaching. I don't know the Islamic teaching.
Don't
But
say
if
maybe
she
or
went to
not.
Afghanistan or the olden way of Saudi Arabia, she would be
No,
beaten up.
if
Maybe.
Afghanistan was ruled by the Taliban,
Maybe I
and
need
they
to
had
speak with
a
a Talibanese
specific
scholar.
listen, if they specifically had a rule in place where women have to dress like this, otherwise they're going to beat up, for example,
You would
then
dress up.
then it's the rule of the Taliban government. But if you try to then link that, oh, this rule comes from Islam,
Yeah.
then you have to say, where is it coming from? Is this, for example,
so do you condemn-
in Saudi Arabia, they have banking based on interest, and Islam says no interest. Where does the rule come from? Does it come from Islam?
No, I agree. Saudi Arabia isn't following Islam properly.
Yeah. So you and I may have quarrel with a certain government and their rules, but to necessarily link that with our religion is a different thing altogether.
We should
You
all
have
try
to-
to follow Islam to the core.
Yeah,
for
but do
its
you
natural
condemn
state.
what they
People
do?
like to
If
change
the
it and
Taliban
twist it
was
and
going
do
to beat
different
her up,
things.
would you condemn it?
But
You
it's
didn't
not
understand
Islam.
that.
It's not Islam. Of course we condemn it. It's not Islam. To
If
beat up
you
innocent
go to a
women.
country
Maybe it's from
knowing
Islam.
that if
Not
you
from Islam, bro.
How do you know?
listen,
How do you
my friend,
know?
I don't
if
know.
you go
I
to
don't
a
know.
country
quiet then.
and
I said-
before
I
you
said
go,
maybe.
listen, if you go to a country and before you even go to the country, they tell you visa requirements. If you have any illegal drugs and you take them or smuggle them, you will be facing capital punishment. Now, and you go there and you have ganja and heroin and cocaine and all of that, in public, and you're saying, why are you going to kill me and punish me?
Yeah.
You can't do that because that's their law they've already set in place, and they've given enough notice and textual precedence beforehand that if you do that, this is the punishment awaiting for you.
You know what?
So you're basically saying Muslims are at their own will to interpret the law of the Quran and everything like in their own interpretation and way, so they can beat her up. Maybe they
I
don't have to
I
beat
don't-
her up as well.
I don't think you
Dep-
followed.
it-
I don't
it
think you
depends on
followed
how
what we're
they've-
saying.
It
I'm
depends on how
saying
they
a law of a country may be theocratic country based on laws of a particular theology, or could be based on nothing. It could be based on secularism, liberalism. It could be based on some kind of pagan religious
So you're saying either is
understanding.
fine?
Why
I am
is there no
saying,
British
I am
tourists in
saying,
Saudi Arabia? Because they know they have to
your
go
problem,
They know they don't want
your
to go there.
problem
Who's gonna suit them?
is
giving
your
Muslims
problem
Go
is
and do what they want.
not with a country applying certain laws. Your somehow problem is they're applying the laws not from the Quran and Sunnah, right? Is
so,
that?
you're-
They do
so
bid'ah.
Taliban doesn't follow the Quran and
They do
Sunnah?
that.
I don't think you follow our discussion altogether.
Maybe, I don't know.
If the Taliban legislated in such a law, you may not like it because that's what they understood how it should be, how society should be reformed. You might not like it. For example, here in this country, there are many laws you might disagree with. In fact, you might even hate those laws. Would
Yeah, I do.
personally.
Yeah.
Yeah? So what's the problem? It's everywhere the same.
Yeah, but I condemn
Islam,
it.
But they love to focus
Would
on
you
Islam.
condemn it? Would you condemn it?
condemn what?
What Taliban are doing?
Why should I condemn some other country's laws?
I condemn the laws in
The law of the land. How can you condemn
Okay,
that?
fine.
the laws that I don't
What
like.
does
I condemn.
condemning and not condemning help the solution? To
It
bring a
shows
solution?
your morality. It shows your beliefs.
Morality. Okay, where does your morality come from? Let's go to the very core of this discussion.
No, but
What is
you're
the
going
basis?
on to a different
No,
conversation now.
no. You actually came to the very subject matter now.
Okay.
What is your moralities based on?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know? I know what my morality
No,
is
but
based on.
I got
My
your
morality
point.
is based on an absolute standard, which is God. Because anything
Basically-
below that will be relative. Because my morality, if it's relative, and your morality is relative, you can't say my morality is better than yours, and you can't condemn. Because
But basically,
what right do you have to condemn when your morality is relative? In your own understanding, it may not be right, but in my understanding,
is
it's right.
Taliban's morality of beating women
Excuse me.
for not wearing hijab? Is that
Listen.
from God or is it
Listen.
subjective?
Listen.
You
Women,
have to answer this question.
women wearing hijab, do you have a problem with that?
No, I don't. My mom
Right.
wears hijab.
So you don't have a problem with women wearing hijab?
No, there's nothing
So
wrong with it.
if the
But my problem
society,
is someone beating up my
Taliban-
mom
look,
for not wearing hijab.
Taliban doesn't
Because it
implement that
hurts my
anymore.
feelings. It's just natural.
So if Taliban implements to make sure the society
against
where women
Islam.
wears a
Against
hijab,
Islam.
what's your problem?
No, but they make them public.
Is
They're
it from
very
God?
good at all, though.
Is it from
I
God?
have seen atheists.
Now is it from God? Do you
Because
see how?
you said
do you see how
morality
you're
should be
thinking?
from God.
Now you see how you're linking things. When you have Taliban implementing something, you're asking, is it from God?
Yeah.
Is your morality from God?
Somewhat, yeah. In some ways, yeah.
Which ones?
The natural inclinations that God has given us.
Has God communicated to you about
Because,
His
like, for
morality?
example, if I have a wife, if I have a children, I just naturally inclined to love
Sex
them.
outside marriage. What's your opinion on it?
Sex outside marriage. I would prefer men and women to have sex inside marriage.
And what do you do with the people who do have sex outside marriage? How do you deal with them? Do you punish them?
Education,
Do you punish them?
no? Education.
What does God say about it? Does God punish, ask them to be punished?
I don't agree
Can you
with
not
that.
record, please?
Not
yeah?
recorded. Not recorded.
Does God ask them to be punished?
Turn off the...
Can
Not
you-
recorded. Okay, don't stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Switch it off.
Gotta carry on like
Does
Muslims.
God want them to be punished?
God want women who have sex outside of
Not
marriage?
just women, men as well.
So what if God does? Would you support it?
I'm asking you a
But
simple
I'm
question.
asking you too.
Right. Me,
You don't want to
I
say
follow.
you believe
Me,
that,
I
no,
follow what God says.
you're
God
hiding
says
your
they should be
beliefs.
punished. So if there is a system, a country where it is implemented,
Basically,
I say
Taliban.
that's what God's law is.
Basically, Taliban.
So basically,
Would you be happy to live in the Taliban?
listen. Does your God
See, if
tell
keep
you?
talking like this, Tommy Robinson's gonna hate you. You have to.
So
condemn
you
him.
do this. So the only way you behave and talk is to be a beloved of Tommy Robinson. Is that
No,
what you
I
do?
disagree with Tommy Robinson. I condemn
Right.
him.
Why are you
But,
mentioning him then?
Exactly.
but why do you support the Taliban? I mean,
When did I support the
Support
Taliban?
Taliban.
You're the only one mentioning the Taliban.
You're putting
You're the
words
only
in
one
I know,
people's
but
mouths,
it's
bro.
like he's trying to justify Taliban. And
No,
it's like,
I'm
what
simply
should
saying-
be the
Justifying
punishment.
Taliban at all is
He
not
won't
mentioning
condemn.
Taliban.
Okay.
Do you condemn Taliban?
Is the
beating women?
Quran
what
stating the punishment of
And
someone
all
who?
the Muslims are Taliban.
Excuse me. Do you know the Quran states?
Not all, but some.
The Quran states the punishment of people having sex outside marriage. Quran has a law for them. Law, punitive law,
lashing
punish,
them, yeah, by 100
punishment.
lash,
Right.
100
Do you
lash.
disagree with that?
If the Quran is from God, I don't disagree with it.
Is it from God?
No.
Right. And what's your reasons why it's not from God?
What's your reason? I have many reasons, but I have
Can
to
you-
go
can-
now. Maybe I'll discuss it with you another time.
No problem.
It just makes me
problem.
dislike and hate
Going
Islam.
back, code, if you replicate code, you're just making a copy of code. You're not creating new code. So codes are unique in, computer programming. You were asking me earlier, about the Quran saying if you cannot. Yeah, he asked me like if you cannot.
Please
If
talk to each
you
other.
cannot create something like it, then it must be from God. But the same thing applies to computer codes, because if you have a
Can we
unique,
replicate the computer codes?
you would
When
only
we
be
see
making a
them.
copy. You're not creating a new code. You're only making a copy of the code. The code is still unique. It's still the original.
Can
You're
we
only making a copy of the
imitate-
original.
Look, a code has some logical structure to it.
No,
right?
but if somebody writes a code, for example, right, for a computer program, and you replicate it, all you're doing
Not
is burning a
imitating.
copy. No, you're only burning a copy of the same computer program. So if I have like Windows 98 or whatever, and I say I replicate it, that's like burning it to a CD. It's just making a copy. It would be the same thing as like saying I just made a copy of the Quran on PDF.
Is this all?
So
that-
it's not that
all that
unique. So
time
your
that you had-
argument,
no, all that
it
time you
just
had-
came up to me, and I noticed
no.
like, look,
As you realize-
actually, it just there are ways to create things for human beings to create things that cannot be replicated anymore. Like they stay original only, and computer programming codes
there's
are
quite a
an
few-
example of that.
There's quite a few problems
So-
with your analogy. When I replicate something, this is called replication.
Yeah, it's a copy. You're making a copy,
Right.
right? So
What
you're not
we
creating
are-
a new code.
I would like you to listen to what I'm saying.
Okay.
The Quran doesn't say replicate it.
You
Make a
know
copy
that
of
was a
it.
challenge, right? Was to create something like it.
That means imitate it, not replicate it. There's a difference between imitation and replication.
Okay, so, but the same thing applies with computer programming.
I
right?
can use
in
the
computer
similar-
programming. You could imitate it, but nothing is actually similar because the original
So
code
I can
still
imitate
remains
the
the
computer
same.
program, right?
No, you can't. You would come up with a different version, right? You would have Windows 98, and then you would have Windows 10, Windows 10.1, whatever it is. But the version will always be the same. Like those are always going to be original. So it's
Have you played
it's
chess?
gonna be
Have you played chess?
Completely
Have
different.
you played chess?
Yes.
Is there a computer program for chess where you play against the computer?
Yes.
Can I imitate the code and make
I don't
very
think we're
similar
going to do
game, but not with the moves that it's there in the system?
Yeah. In that case, it would be a totally different code. Yeah, it would be a totally different code.
I can have the same.
If you change anything, the code changes. So it's not the same.
Imitation is by understanding the structure, the logic, the code, in this case. Okay, you have two different parties. You can play against each other,
Yeah.
and each has a particular value and a strength. Okay.
Yeah.
What, for example, the knight and the bishop and the queen has
Yeah.
power of.
Yeah.
Power of. So I can replicate that. Imitate in the sense, okay, I can give another, I can introduce other things on the basis of this, and I can have a game similar to chess, and it looks like a chess, but it's not like chess. I can
It's not
imitate.
exact. It's not exact, right?
I don't need to
It's-
replicate it. If it's exact, it's a
it's-
replication.
yeah.
If it's imitation,
But so it's not the same. It's not exactly the same.
it,
So
it follows the same kind of logic, and
No,
it can be done.
yeah, it will still be a chess game, but when you change the coding on the actual program, it will change drastically just by changing the types of moves that you wanted to do. So I mean,
By
that's one of the
looking at-
reasons why when
see,
this
that-
challenge of saying
the problem-
like if you can't imitate it, therefore it's from God, that doesn't
No,
work.
I find it very difficult. That's why I gave you, because of language and literature is in your field of interest, I gave you something to understand about the structure of a building, for example. You know very well, come on, in your heart, that building cannot be imitated by anyone. So you need to have a rational response to it. How can we make a building when no one can make a building? Buildings.
Have you been to Las Vegas?
Yeah, but buildings have been. No, but buildings are created by men. We know buildings are created by men, is what I'm saying. So, do you know about the building aspect? Obviously.
It cannot be imitated.
So
but
obviously,
if you study geometry, there's something called a similar triangle.
yeah. But the thing is, even if we take a building, for example,
quite funny
we know that
when
buildings are
people
actually
make
built by human
comments like
beings.
yourself without realizing the discussion. We had a discussion more than half an hour earlier on, and I gave an example about a building in which all the bricks were floating in space, not touching each other. So when you go to close inspection, you see the wall, the bricks are there, it's made of bricks, but the bricks are floating each other from in space, not touching each other, right? Can you make a building like that in Las Vegas?
But you're comparing that building
Who
to
knows?
a document.
Who knows?
I'll tell you why. Because you're basically saying that just because something has not been done, which means that something cannot be done in the future.
I'm asking you, if I'm building...
There's a flaw in your assumption.
No, the flaw in your argument is, in the future everything is possible.
Yeah, but the
The
comparison.
flaw in your argument is, everything is possible in the future. Of course. That's nonsense.
Not really. I mean, look at your smartphones. If I took this into like 1700s, they would think I'm a prophet.
This is so ahistorical. Do you know the invention of the flight?
Yeah. That seemed to defy.
See,
That
look,
defied
one second,
physics
one
to
second,
them.
one second.
No, and
One
just
second.
going
If
back.
if you allow me to explain
No,
that
give me a
analogy.
chance. Give me a chance.
Go ahead.
If I give you a building like this, where the bricks are floating,
Well, I don't know. I'm saying there is a possibility.
can you
because-
not listen to the
Just
argument?
let him finish. I've heard it before. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. And it says in the plaque, this is made by God. If you disagree, if you don't believe in it, bring something like it. So you look at this building and you say, you know what? I can understand no one can make it, but in the future someone can. But how does it answer the question who made it?
It's possibly somebody. I would say it's more possible that somebody did make it. I would think that somebody did make it and left.
Going around here, there seems to be a very narrow discussion about God. I mean, basically, I think
Yeah.
Can you focus on this?
No. It's God, and then he brought in computer. He sort of broadened the horizon a little bit. So I'm just kind of bring the two together. I mean, which God are you talking about? There are many traditions of this God.
Thank you for the introduction. Can you answer the question?
No. I'm just saying. Your concept of God is a very narrow one. There are different traditions in this world. People have different concepts of things like God. Those who believe in it.
All right. Can I answer the question? All right.
I mean,
It's just your
I
example.
don't know
Who made this building?
I don't know which building are you talking about. You're not
I just thought about this in Athens, right? They would see the Acropolis and the Temple of Zeus, and they would say that this was made by the gods.
That's right.
I gave
came
you
from God.
I gave you an
Because how could
example.
human beings
I
make-
find
No, I mean,
this is
right?
strange when people interact in Speaker's Corner. They think it's just a matter of a joke. I gave you a serious example today, 2019. If I were to give you a building in that nature, the way it's constructed, and I challenge you, anyone, to imitate it, you know very well.
It might not happen in my
No,
life.
I actually think, like, if the example you gave. I mean, first of all, there's two parts to my
In
response.
the future, you can become a toad.
No,
Right?
and
It's
it's not in the
possible.
future.
I think, by the way, in terms of development of technology, if we go back in history, you mentioned the Acropolis, and let's go back even.
Yeah.
A lot of things today get developed and are constructed, or whether it's the iPhone or whatever, in a span of very few years.
Yeah. And if-
There are things in this world that exist: ancient India, ancient China,
Yeah.
ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
A piece of construction, whether it's a monument or whatever, it took generations to do.
Yeah.
I don't think you understand what we're talking about.
No, but
It's
we were
not a
talking about.
question of.
I was talking about. If I want to bring him, I want to update him on the discussion. No.
I got a
We were
piece, so I
talking about. No, we
I
were
got a-
talking about how the Quran challenges
first of all,
people
I
to
credit
bring a chapter like into it. And I said the chapter is in such a way constructed that it was impossible to imitate. 1400 years or nearly 1500 years have passed.
Do you know the universe, by the way? Do you know the universe? Are you
Yeah,
aware
but
of
that's
the
the thing.
universe?
That,
Are you even listening
I'm
to what
sorry.
I'm
I'm
saying?
sorry, but can I just finish
Hang
my
on.
point?
If you
Saying
don't
something
allow
is
to
impossible-
continue,
If you're saying
the
something is
discussion.
impossible to imitate, again, that doesn't prove divinity.
What I'm saying is this.
And you're
you
comparing
are
a building.
forced to
You're
come.
comparing a building to a document.
What is your, I mean,
And
where
that's
is your
a really tough.
Where is your
I know you got
perspective on
it.
divinity
It's a
coming
little bit
from?
of a
I mean,
tough,
it sounds very alien to my tradition. Where is
I know
your
you're
perspective
Muslim,
of
but
divinity
How many?
coming from?
There has to be one absolute creator.
I'm
You
going to
disagree?
compare buildings.
I
that look
don't know,
amazing.
but you know, it's very alien to my tradition. I've
No,
never
no,
heard.
no.
I've
Let's talk
never
about your tradition.
No.
Is it possible to have more than one absolute creator for our
There
universe?
must be certain things.
As far as my
be a
tradition is
engineer
concerned,
that
And that's why
everything
I
is
said,
up
like,
for
if
debate and
you
discussion.
So
We don't know the truth.
okay. So there, can there be?
That's my tradition.
No,
Brother,
let's,
I'm not going to go anywhere. Let's go.
let's check your tradition. Is it possible to have more than one absolute creator in our universe?
It's a discussion.
I'm discussing right
No,
now.
it's a discussion in my tradition.
So I'm discussing with you right now. Is it possible?
I don't know. The discussion is
Let
on.
me tell you why it's not possible.
I mean, I mean, I don't know where your concept of truth is coming from.
Listen, let me tell you why
I mean,
it's
frankly, it sounds a little fishy to me.
First of all, I don't think you're open to discussion in the first place. Okay, so now, can there be more than one absolute creator?
The greatest traditions which has survived
We're
millennia.
not discussing.
No, the
You're just
greatest-
making a blanket statement. My
greatest-
tradition says this,
No,
your
but my
tradition says
tradition.
this.
The greatest tradition.
Your tradition, which
Buildings
is
out there. There's a lot of buildings out there that look like
What do you mean?
What is your tradition?
buildings that look like
The Vedic,
standing.
the Puranic?
No human beings.
Which tradition is it?
I don't know. I don't know what is
You
my
said,
tradition.
you said my tradition. I would like to know which one
I'll
is your
tell you.
tradition.
I was born in India. So obviously I represent a certain tradition, and there are many strands
Based
from
on
that
which
country.
text?
We don't believe in texts.
So based on what?
You know, you are assuming that all truth is based on a text.
No, I'm asking you what's based on what?
It's a lot of it. A lot of it is oral tradition.
Good, oral tradition. So what is this teaching? Is it codified?
But the thing is, let's not even go there.
No,
But
let's
what
go
I'm
there.
saying is
This oral tradition-
wisdom does not come. Wisdom does not come by looking at a
Is the
thing.
wisdom
wisdom
codified?
wisdom
Or is it
comes-
always oral?
Wisdom comes by looking broadly and discussing and debating, and also assuming. The premise should be that we are not quite there. We don't know what the
Problem
truth
that you
is.
have, right?
I don't have a problem. I'm a very happy person.
Your oral tradition-
Despite not believing in God, I'm a very happy person.
Your oral tradition, your oral
See,
tradition.
I'm a little different from him. I'm a deist.
The oral tradition that you talk
I
about.
think we got like a.
Can I read about it in writing?
It doesn't matter. You know, I mean, you're talking about.
So do I have to listen to someone about
No,
this
which
tradition?
tradition are you talking about?
Your tradition.
No, your tradition is how many thousands of years old?
1.4.
Firstly,
1,000.
I think you're not really
I mean,
engaging in the discussion. When
there
I
are-
try
you
to
know, I mean,
understand your
somebody,
tradition,
somebody, I was standing somewhere in one of the discussions. He talked about Afghanistan. You know, there was a guy who was talking about Afghanistan, and he said these are Muslim lands. You know, these were all Buddhist lands before that.
yeah,
You know,
I'm trying to understand your tradition,
Zoroastrian.
and you know what you're doing?
go to the beautiful Swat Valley in Pakistan.
Excuse me.
The beautiful Swat Valley in Pakistan, and they're doing so much to preserve the Buddhist tradition there.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
That's what. I mean, you know, it's a very unique country because that's the vision of their founder.
Fine. What I would like to know is, from your traditions, the oral traditions otherwise, is there a creator of our universe?
I don't know. You are saying that there is an answer to everything. There is no harm.
Do you know he exists?
There is no harm in.
Do you know he exists?
There is no harm in accepting the fact that I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm a deist, but I agree with that.
Do you
I
know
would
you
rather
exist?
say it's okay.
Or is that a dispute as well?
Well, there is a school of thought which says that let me answer. There's a school of thought which says that everything is an illusion.
So
I'm an
asking
illusion.
you now, are you an illusion or you exist in reality?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I don't. For instance, I personally don't care about life and death.
Okay. So, do you exist or are you an illusion?
There is a school of thought.
No, you. What do you think?
I think I'm an illusion.
Thank you very much.
That makes sense.
So if I punch you, you
I
won't
hope.
feel it, will you? I exist.
I may feel it. I may feel it, but how does it matter?
I'd say.
I thought so. I thought so.
I'll say thanks for-
No. I thought so that you were an illusion. I thought
Thanks
so.
for bringing violence into this.
Violence.
No. I'm
been
sort
illusion.
of.
How do you know?
I'm sort of like
My friend.
in some ways.
Thanks for bringing violence into this.
Look how he thinks.
Violence.
He thinks the violence
Look
is
at
real.
look at the
But
real
he's an
colors of
illusion.
this gentleman.
Look at the absurdity.
As I was
It's
going,
not
he says
absurd.
thanks
It is
for
absurd.
bringing
You said
violence into it.
violence in, so you thought it was real, not an illusion.
What are you talking about?
Adding to the
No.
discussion.
No, but you said
Thanks for bringing violence into it.
for what you were alluding to, you thought the violence can be real.
But
It can be an illusion, right?
the illusion is also under discussion. Let me
And
tell
so
you
is
that.
the, so is the violence, right? Typical. When it came to violence, he thought it was real.
Yeah.
Did you see the double standard?
Oh, hypocrisy, isn't
No,
it? What is violence is real? Otherwise, an illusion. Wake up.
Your perspective is very narrow and broad.
No, I mean, so I'm a deist. I believe in the higher power, right? But at the same time, I don't